everyone, and welcome to the Burien Youth Council Public Forum. We're really happy to host this event and to have everyone here today. Thank you for coming and supporting. And we would like to thank all of our sponsors for helping us make this come together. Thank you, Chef Antonio, and Weekend for the catering service. Thank you, big shout out to them. And yeah, we just hope everyone has a good time tonight. Yeah.
Hola, buenas tardes. Hola, buenas tardes. Queremos darles las gracias y la bienvenida a cada uno de ustedes que están aquí. Le queremos dar las gracias a todos los organizaciones que nos ayudaron, especialmente al restaurante El Pique y Chef Antonio. Esperamos que se la pasen bien y que aprovechen de este evento que pusimos juntos para ustedes. Gracias.
Alright, so before we start, we also want to talk about the next event that we'll be having, following that this hopefully goes well. So the next event we're going to have is going to be August 23rd here as well. We're going to be having a movie showing and a Know Your Rights workshop. So we're going to have different people within the area of immigration come and speak about what rights people have, as everybody has rights, and so we want to be able to elevate that. And so, yeah. And then I also want to personally thank everyone here. I know everybody on Burien Youth Council is happy to have you here. For the people also watching online, so thank you for your engagement and support of the young people.
Próximo evento que vamos a tener, esperando que este evento salga bien, va a ser agosto 23 en este mismo sitio. Vamos a poner una película y luego vamos a invitar a abogados y personas del pueblo para que vengan y para que podamos conocer nuestros derechos, porque todos tenemos derechos y tenemos el derecho de saber nuestros derechos. Entonces esperamos que todo salga bien y están bienvenidos al próximo evento que va a ser agosto 23.
Okay, I would also like to recant. Thank you all for coming out today. I know that takes a lot out of your Monday to be here, so thank you for that. I'm just going to do a quick disclaimer. There's been a lot of tension around this event, and I would like to diffuse that. So we would like to, as he might say, also take this time to inform all community members in attendance here tonight, as well as those who may be viewing via live stream and social media postings, that this forum has always been intended to fulfill the need for political education amidst youth, but also the greater circles we all subscribe to. This is not the manufactured and biased product of city councils or any other outside organization's individual agenda. In this space, at this time, the only agenda present is the one of youth, young adults, and soon-to-be voters, not children. We take what we are doing here very seriously because we know, more than many, that the issues we bring up today will be our reality and our burden. I'd also like to address the fact that we do not have all the candidates here represented. The reason being, many of them have scheduling conflicts or other sort of things outside today. Again, recanting that being here on a Monday night is very difficult for some, and running a campaign takes up a lot of time, space, and energy. So, and in no way is it a reflection on them. We invited all candidates, and all candidates responded as they were able to. I would also like to remind everyone that we are taking open questions throughout the night. So there's a box in the back, I believe. It has all of our posters on it. On that poster, it's yellow and it has little slips of paper in there that you can write your questions down on. We would really appreciate all you guys participating in that aspect of tonight, because this is not supposed to be solely produced by BYC. All the questions, we want to get your input, and I definitely believe that the prospective council members here today would also like to hear your input. Thank you.
Queremos clarificar que porque este evento ha tenido mucha atención y queremos clarificar que estamos siendo neutrales, no estamos escogiendo ningún lado, y sí invitamos a cada uno de las personas que están corriendo para la ciudad. Muchos nos dijeron que iban a tener problemas tratando de venir porque tienen un schedule muy ocupado y está lleno. Entonces, pero nomás queremos clarificar que invitamos a todos y y también afuera hay una caja amarilla por si ustedes gustan preguntar preguntas, ahí las pueden poner y nosotros vamos a preguntarlas al final.
Now, since we're a little short on time, there's a lot of traffic and we understand that, but we're going to have to skip our initial introductions. If you want to talk to the candidates after the event, definitely feel free to. We also have bios for everyone except for Sydney, where we're so sorry, Sydney. We love you a lot, and she also has a site and website, so just making sure that we all know that we're supporting all the kids in this space, and not just individuals as well. So the way that this is going to work for the council members in the room or prospective council members in the room, but also for the audience, we're going to be going down the line. We have multiple questions. So for the first questions, we'll be starting with the first candidate that's closest to me, and then going down, everyone just in as a different order. And for the next question, we'll be starting with the next candidate. So if you have any questions about that candidate, please ask me. That was clear enough, because that was yeah. Does that make sense? Everyone, I want to make eye contact with everyone. Are we all good? Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. So we're going to get started with the questions. Is everyone in the room ready? Just know we also have.
So you're going to each have 1 minute to answer the questions, and we will also give you a sign for 30 seconds and 15 seconds, and then we'll ask you to stop, just so that you're aware of how this is going to work.
Okay, are we ready?
Okay, nada más para avisarles, vamos porque estamos un poquito cortos en tiempo y hay mucho tráfico. Vamos a quitar de la agenda que los candidatos se introduzcan, pero tenemos información de cada uno de ellos, excepto de Sydney, pero nosotros la apreciamos mucho y la queremos. La manera que va a empezar es que Fel aquí va a preguntar las preguntas y vamos a empezar con el primer candidato al lado de nosotros. Van a tener 1 minuto para contestar la pregunta. Nuestros amigos aquí les van a avisar cuando tengan 30 segundos y 15 segundos para contestar la pregunta. Y la segunda pregunta va a empezar con la segunda candidata, el segundo candidato y así vamos a...
Okay, so the first question we have is, how do you plan to involve residents and more specifically young people in the decision-making process in our town, considering the fact that 50% eligible young people, about 24 million youth ages 18 to 29 voted in the 2016 general election?
Okay, so is this on?
I don't think so.
Hello? Okay, so first of all, thank you to the Youth Council for hosting. I think having a Youth Council is one of the biggest things that we can do to get more youth involved. One of my favorite stories I like to tell when I was campaigning is how I was on the Youth Council when I was in high school, and then when the City Council discussed bringing it back, I went several times and spoke at public testimony about bringing it back. So I think that's really important, and if I were elected, what I would do is look to the Youth Council as sort of an advisory board. In the same way we have a Human Services Commission, that we have a Parks Commission, different boards full of people that are experts in their areas. And so I look at the Youth Council like that. I look at them as like an expert on youth issues and how Burien issues impact youth. And one of the things I remember is back when I was on the Youth Council, Jack Block Jr., former City Council member, he took the time to come and attend some of the Youth Council meetings. So I will look forward to doing that.
Thank you. So first I'll address our youth. The most important thing is to have a presence online. Our youth spend a large amount of time online. So having Facebook pages with information about how our city is progressing on various issues and various events that are going on. Twitter feed in order to be able to talk to people who want immediate responses or are hoping for quick responses to things that they're asking about. Having an Instagram account, for example, so you have a lot of really good pictures about what is going on and how things are progressing. I'll address the general population, the general citizenry of Burien next, and that is that we have a lot of wonderful events that go on, and only at some of these events does Burien have a presence in a booth or something to that effect. It's important to be able to make sure that things that are going on, that we want input from our residents, we have a booth that actually has that information. For example, at the farmers market, the last time I went a couple of weeks ago, they had a booth there.
Whenever. Oh, hi everyone, I'm Kevin Schilling. I went to St. Francis of Assisi School in Burien from '99 to 2008 and then graduated from Aviation High School in 2012 in the Highlands School District. So I know what it's like to grow up as a youth in Burien, as a young adult in Burien. The number one most important thing we can do as a city government is empower young people to make and create their own communities for themselves, to allow them to have agency to come to the city council, to come to the city government and say, we need X and you're not doing it, here's why we need it, and to ensure that we not only listen, but pay attention to the issues they're bringing up to the city council. That means being involved and engaged and collaborating with the school districts and the schools individually to give young people and young adults the opportunities and the necessary information to design their own organizations and communities and to empower them to bring what they want to the city council and to the city government. Because we don't know what young people want unless they tell us.
Good evening. I'm Robert Richmond, and I'm on position 6. And thank you for the question. Kind of my first idea is, whenever I think of ideas, I think how we're going to pay for them. So I really want to start with my idea of W2E. That is how I'm going to pay for this idea I'm going to bring up. I would literally have the kids each week or once a month sit in our meetings, council meetings, tell us what you're looking for. I would literally go, we're going to build a new community center, a brand new community center from scratch. Same location, we're just going to tear it down and build a new one. But I want you folks, what do you want inside of there? I know we have the skate park, which is fine, but is there a swimming pool idea? Is there recreation, educational things you guys want? We don't know. We have to ask the question. So I come to you and say, what would you like in a new community center paid for by W2E?
Hello, I'm Sophia Aragon. I'm running for position 6, and I appreciate all the comments thus far, and I'll just add that it's important for city council members to actually reach out and go to the community where the youth are. Schools are an example, and early on my campaign, I reached out to people in the Highlands schools to find out what partnerships are between the council and the schools, so that's definitely something to build on. And also a forum to ask the students themselves, what are the major issues important to them? Because it could be really different compared to their parents or the teachers that they work with. And I think an interesting idea, and I did this in my workplace, is teach people how to engage with public officials. So I think it would be really fun to have a workshop with youth and have them experience what's it like to testify in front of the city council. You know, what do you need to do that? And then on the reverse, what's it like to be in our seat when we're being asked the really hard questions? So I think that's a really great activity to get students engaged. And also, as you know, we need to have civil discourse. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I want to start by first acknowledging that we are here today on occupied Duwamish and Salish land. I think that's important to note. Moving on to the question at hand. I think we need to focus on broadening our outreach to our community, especially with our youth. The work the Burien Youth Council is doing is incredible, and so empowering them to continue that and further that is important. I think small things and large things are key. One thing that is very important to me is implementing subtitles on our live stream for city council meetings, so our deaf community has access to watch those, and making sure they are available in multiple languages so people who may not speak English can also watch our city council meetings and participate in that. I believe that doing outreach at schools is incredibly important. I would love to see more of our elected officials going out and touching bases with our youth, and listening is the #1 thing. We need to make sure that our elected officials are always accessible to people so we can hear what your needs are, what your concerns are, and what you need.
Okay, next question. Real change states that Quote, on January 9th, the City Council representing a community of roughly 50,000 people passed an ordinance barring its police and staff from inquiring about residents' immigration status or religion, end quote. What is your stance on the sanctuary city ordinance that passed in January 11th, 2017?
Okay, en enero 9, en enero 9, la ciudad pasó, estaban viendo una ordinancia, de que la policía no puede trabajar con inmigración y dar, ninguna información de los residentes de la ciudad, del pueblo. Entonces queremos saber la perspectiva de cada de los candidatos y cómo miran y lo que piensan de lo que pasó en enero 9.
We're going to start with Omaha.
Thank you for the question. Purely and simply, the sanctuary city ordinance is all about our police not doing the work for ICE and CBP. It is not our job to do the federal government's work. And it is the federal government's job to come to us, to our police, and say, hey, we have this warrant and we would like your help in executing it. And that's all our Burien Police Department has to do. The rest of it, it's not our job to go around asking people, are you an immigrant? Are you illegal? How long have you been here? Do you have a green card? That's not our job. Our police job is to make sure our city's laws are being executed properly and to do the job of making sure our cities are safe.
I'll first say that I think that immigration and immigrants are fundamental to the character and quality of our nation and our communities, and we should welcome them with open arms and help them start businesses, raise families, own homes, etc., be involved in the community. Secondly, I will say that the Burien ordinance was just in line with the county ordinance to not work with ICE to require immigration status in questioning. I do think that there's no reason to randomly walk up to anyone on the street to ask them about their immigration status. It's inherently discriminatory and prejudicial, and that's what we're getting at here: to not discriminate and be prejudiced against members of our community, but to ensure that our local law enforcement have the tools necessary to respond to criminal behavior for anybody for any reason. That does not have to do with your immigration status. That is involved with the federal government and not with our local law enforcement.
Well, this is pretty easy. We are not the federal government, so I am not a fan at all of any kind of stop and frisk or anything crazy like that. You should not feel endangered walking down the street to go to our country. That's ridiculous. I'm trying to be more mature. I was just about to say something. That's ridiculous. We're all humans. We're all in this together. That's all I have to say, really. I'm very, very adamant about this. We are not going to stop anyone that's walking down the street to say, hey, where are your papers at? That's freaking ridiculous.
Well, I'm committed to being all I can to have a safe and inclusive Burien. Anyone who lives here deserves to feel that way. 1 in 6 residents in the state of Washington are actually immigrants to the state of Washington. I'm one of them. And I think that actually, if our populace thinks that they can be stopped and asked at any time, that actually really undermines our criminal efforts, and that people will less likely approach the police to say they saw something and it could be a crime. And the other thing too is that I know that our police are trying really hard to do community outreach and build relationships so that people are willing to go to them. But if our people are afraid of our own police, that's not going to happen, and that's going to undermine our own efforts. So the ordinance that we have is a good thing.
First and foremost, I believe it is vital that we ensure the safety and well-being of the people of our city. We keep our families together. I actually serve on the Burien White Center ICE Rapid Response Team. We go out and respond to calls to make sure people facing ICE know their rights and have proper representation. The Burien Sanctuary City Ordinance has been challenged. There is currently a legal challenge ongoing, and I have been and will remain a strong advocate for keeping our Sanctuary City Ordinance in place regardless of whether or not I get elected. It is an issue of public safety, and it makes a big difference in the lives of people living in our city. So I will continue fighting to keep our families safe.
All right, moving on to the next question. One more, sorry.
So I also support the Sanctuary City Ordinance that we have. I agree with everything that's been said. I'm also on the ICE Rapid Response Team with Sydney, and we were both in Tukwila recently for the Jose Robles action that took place there. One thing I would like to focus on is, I think we need to draw a distinction between public safety and law enforcement. You know, I absolutely support public safety. And Sophia made a good point about we want people who may be undocumented, maybe the victims of violent crime, to feel comfortable going to our police and reporting that. And I think having the sanctuary ordinance in place is one tool that we have that makes people feel comfortable doing that, so I support it.
All right, now moving on to the next question. So, how would you approach bridging the language and cultural divide between the BPD and the prevalent Latinx community, considering the fact that the Latinx population ranks second largest population within Burien at 24.3%, and the second most used language in Burien is Spanish at 19.2%?
Did you say BPD, so Burien Police Department?
Yes.
Well, I think police personnel that work within communities should look like the communities that they work with. So we need to hire more police officers and law enforcement officers that look like the communities they're trying to build trust and relationships with. So that's number one. Number two, I think our language study in school is not funded to the point we need to be having it funded. So I would be a voice for lobbying and advocating for increased state legislative funds for our local schools to improve language learning so that students that don't speak Spanish or any other language can have options for second language learning, as well as for Spanish speakers to have access to English language classes as well. So I support both hiring police officers that look like the communities they're serving in and building relationships within, and also being an advocate and standing up to the state legislature and saying we need more funding for our school districts to support language options for people.
It's a great question. First and foremost, I would kind of start at a bigger level. The state academy is right up the street. Kind of get them involved, bring them down to our level, have them, I'm sure they've got a lot of folks who can handle different languages across the state. Bring those folks in, help with our police officers. Get with the community support leaders of all the ethnicities, I hate that word, ethnicities, and then just have like a more of a community, kind of a block party. Kind of get everybody out together. We don't know each other until we get out and talk to each other. So therefore, I would literally start bigger picture, kind of get the right folks involved, bring them down to our level, at the city level, get with the officers we have in charge. And also, I would recruit out of our high schools. Our police department should look like our neighbors, our neighborhood. And so those folks, young people, get involved in the police. Then therefore, you're gonna be knowing your friends and your neighbors, and you're gonna be policing each other. So that's kind of how I would start.
I think that we should continue to support inclusive hiring practices by our police force to make sure they're reaching out for good candidates that reflect our community. The other piece I would strongly support also, if it doesn't occur already, is bias training among police. And the concept of bias is that we all bring with ourselves our own experiences, and so therefore we have blind spots or assumptions about other people that we're not even aware of. Okay? We just bring what we've our experience. So I would want to make sure our police are well aware of that education. It's available to them, because today it's one group that may make up a majority of our community, but in years to come it may be another. So it's really important for our police force as well as ourselves to understand our own biases and what gets in the way of good community service.
So I want to echo what most of the folks up here have said, that the police who are patrolling our neighborhoods should look like and reflect the diversity of our community. I would also like to point out that I actually worked on the campaign to pass de-escalation for police in Washington, and I think that a language barrier does contribute to unnecessary escalation of incidents that can really result in really unfortunate circumstances. So I think that making sure our officers are able to communicate with our community is very key. I would support implementing free classes for our officers for Spanish and other languages. I would even be on board with paying them hours to attend those classes and prioritizing hiring people who are bilingual or multilingual on our police force, because that is a vital aspect of being able to protect and serve our community. So we should make every effort that we can to enable our officers to do so safely.
So we do have a lot of training that we ask the officers to go through. We have bias training, we have de-escalation training, as has been mentioned. I think language training absolutely is something that's important. Spanish is the second most common language, but Vietnamese is the third. And maybe we even go down the list a little bit further. But basic commands, you know, when you have an interaction, they're telling you to put your hands up, to drop the weapon, the typical things that a police officer would say to someone, they should know those in at least the top 5 or 6 languages in our community.
A significant number of incidents that police are involved in, especially when there's multi-language barriers. There are the case of a police officer saying something, do something, and the person doesn't even understand. I think that multi-language teaching should be a requirement for any police officer that the Burien Police Department hires. I think that any police officer who does not have more than one language that they can speak should actually be taught. Several people have already mentioned that. And I think it should be at the public's expense, because it's important for us, for all of us who have more than one language that we speak, to be able to understand what our police force is actually trying to tell them, both as far as an incident that is occurring with an individual, or in order, or as well in dealing with emergency issues.
Okay, moving on to the next question. In 2018, the King County Council voted to bring back funding for the Sheriff's Gang Unit in response to the uptick in violent shootings and actions linked to gang activity in cities such as Burien. What is your stance on the reinstatement of the gang unit, and how would you propose council work with the BPD, Burien Police Department, in order to ensure we do not succumb to targeted and racialized over-policing in communities of color?
It's a good question. I'm not a huge believer that we have a huge gang problem. I've lived around, and I know we have gang issues. People kind of want to be doing things and tagging and doing those kind of things, but do we have a pure gang problem? I would honestly say no. Now, to work with the task force, I would be more than willing to do that. We will have the money to do so. I've proposed maybe cameras, kind of taking care of things. How do you stop somebody doing something in real time? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. But do we have a rampant gang problem? I would honestly say no. But we would use the funds and accordingly. That's just what I would answer.
I support targeted activities to address the gang issue, because when I'm doorbelling, I do hear that it's a concern among our community members. What I do hope, though, when in implementation, that you actually work with affected communities in partnership.
I really appreciate the work our Chief of Police, Ted Bowe, has been doing to address bias in our police force here. And I think that we need to address the underlying cause of gang violence, which is people turning to gangs, whether that's because they have lack of family support or they face poverty. There are a lot of reasons that people get into that lifestyle, and we need to address the root cause of that so we can prevent that before the problem starts.
I support the gang unit, and I support that it's the sheriff's department, because I think that gangs is a South King County issue. It's not just a Burien issue. The gangs don't know what city borders are. I think, however, also that once again, it's a question of how we use our police resources. And I think it's important that we focus on crime, violent crime, or serious property crimes, and we use our resources effectively. And I think that also, so I wouldn't necessarily say that we need more police officers. I just think we need to use the ones we have more effectively.
I am also in favor of the gang unit being re-implemented. One of the most important things we need to do, and several people have already mentioned this, is to actually address the root cause. Gangs don't show up in healthy neighborhoods where people are happy and they don't really need to join gangs. And better yet, they're not being forced to. One of the unfortunate things about some gangs is that, especially when they're a cultural situation, the gang members will try to force people to actually join and threaten family members, threaten friends, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the kinds of issues that the gang unit has to be able to keep in mind when they're trying to deal with these gangs, because there, as somebody else has already mentioned, there are many different reasons why it is that somebody joins a gang. And just like there's many different reasons that people end up homeless, and it's not all just because they want to.
Yes, I think the gang unit is important for ensuring that we reduce criminal activity within gangs and outside gangs in Burien. I think that has to go along with intergovernmental work in accordance with reducing not only gang violence, but all violent crime across the board, especially by investing in youth development programs and youth engagement programs that run alongside the gang unit. So we're talking about short-term and long-term investments here. Short-term to reduce crime that's happening now, and long-term to ensure that it is reduced and prevented in the future. So yes, the gang unit is vital in our intergovernmental organizations, especially for the Sheriff's Department's relationship with the City of Burien Police. This also goes along with an earlier conversation around racism and immigration status. And I would just want to make sure that the gang unit works collaboratively with all intergovernmental services to not be targeting people based off race or based off any kind of affiliation, but that we're working collaboratively that way.
Okay, so our next question is, according to the Puget Sound Regional Council Housing Affordability Document released May of 2018, in 2010, the median home price was $340,100 within King County. In 2018, it was doubled at $648,000. As young people that are looking to be first home buyers, what would you push on City Council to alleviate significant burden?
Housing is a major issue when I, again, doorbell and talk to people, and I think Burien has a real opportunity to increase our housing accessibility and affordability for all families. We've stepped up and become a regional growth center. That means that we have economic incentives because we are committed to building a lot of the housing that's needed around the Puget Sound area. So right now is the Downtown Core Advisory Committee. They're doing work on that. And I would encourage the youth in this room to get engaged in that if you haven't already, because you can help in the design of the city of where can we build more dense housing as well as keep the single family housing that we have. What is the good mix, and where can we build economic centers and make them stronger so that we can draw more jobs that will in turn support families here in Burien. So those are the things that I would do to increase affordable housing.
So affordable housing is one of the biggest issues I think that we face in our community. We have families getting priced out of their homes left and right, forced to leave our community, and that's devastating for so many people. I think that one of the biggest issues that we need to look at is just the amount of housing that we have available, because we do have a shortage right now, and we need to be focusing heavily on making sure we have enough homes for our people. Looking at our zoning laws is a huge part of that, because we have a lot of space available here in Burien that we are not utilizing. Creating access to build up, to expand our multi-family dwellings, and also ensuring that our single-family neighborhoods are well taken care of and supported by things like public transit. Access to our city and our resources is key. Another big issue I'd like to focus on is rent control, which is something we have to focus on at a state level, but we can lobby for that at a city level as well.
Zoning is absolutely the #1 barrier to having affordable housing. And I think it's important to acknowledge that zoning, the history of zoning is rooted in racial discrimination. It was instituted because they wanted black neighborhoods and white neighborhoods to be separate. And the Supreme Court has since ruled that you can't do that, but now we see this class discrimination, which is often just a proxy for race discrimination. And I would look at what the city of Minneapolis has done. They've effectively eliminated single-family zoning. Any single-family lot, they let you have up to 2 accessible dwelling units. So I would look at that, but I also think ADUs aren't going to be the whole answer. Downtown, we need to develop more in our downtown because that's where we have the capacity for it. That's where we already have the infrastructure, the access to transit. But yeah, just a bunch of different zoning changes. That's the #1 way to address this problem.
What Charles just said about the zoning is absolutely correct. The one thing about our comprehensive plan here in Burien is it was originally created in 1997, or one of the most recent recreations of it was in 1997, and it was supposed to be for 20 years. Well, we're past 2017, and we absolutely need to update that comprehensive plan and make changes to the zoning laws that we have here in Burien. You're not going to end up having appropriate affordable housing here by making sure that all of the nice, pretty single-family homes are the only ones that are there. The second thing is that I'm very much in favor of the urban planning center, or the urban center that's being created. This is going to really help with creating an environment where people can live in very nice apartment complexes, duplexes, fourplexes, and be able to get to where they need to go for shopping, for groceries, etc., without even having to drive. It makes it so much easier to deal with parking when it comes to trying to find affordable housing and living in those locations.
Well, first of all, the question was about youth and young adult access to home ownership, and no one's answered that question, so I will. They can't afford a home in Burien or in King County. And it's because it is unaffordable for people who do not make 6 figures at a tech job. It is unaffordable for the median income in Burien, which is $31,000 a year. And it's not because people don't want to own a home. It's not because people aren't working hard enough. It's because they can't get an increase in their paycheck, and they can't find rental units that they can afford. The price of a 1-bedroom apartment in Burien right now is $1,100 a month. That's a 1-bedroom apartment in Burien. So I advocate for not just working with zoning, but not just working with developers, but making sure that we can incentivize more apartment and multifamily and condo construction in Burien so that young people can have a chance to have a roof over their head. Not just own a home, because that's not the dream right now. Young people cannot afford a home right now. And we need to ensure that people have that step to get to that point at some point in their lives.
Just want to let you know, I have a real estate background, have been in since '01. I've ran across this question 100 times. What we need to do, and I know everybody's saying, here's what we need to do, here's what we need to do, and I like what everyone is saying, but let's look at it from the other way around. Who's doing the development? Who's doing the building? You can't demonize those who are doing the development and the building. What we can do is bring them in, sit down and say, here's what our outcome wants to be. They'll listen to us. They will. I know they will. Here's what our outcome wants to be. Here's what they can do and put it to make it affordable. Not everybody's going to get granite countertops. Not everybody's going to get stainless steel. You might have the white appliances, you might have Formica. But this can get done here in Burien. We can make apartments under $1,100. But we will have to sacrifice a little bit of amenity to get that done. Again, I've talked to these guys. It's a permit thing, because permit and time is money. It's a land availability thing. They'll go get the land and build what we want, but we have to bring them in and sit down next to us to get this done.
So this is going to be the last pre-written question. Although attempts, most recently with the Green New Deal, to implement radical but necessary policies from the top down have been unsuccessful, it is still vital that we address the issue of climate change head-on. Would you support a comprehensive citywide plan that provides a set of clear and attainable green goals similar to the structure and scope of Vancouver's Greenest City Action Plan? If so, what would some of those goals be, and how would you incentivize businesses and homeowners to abide by said goals?
I absolutely support every effort to make our city more environmentally friendly and sustainable. I think that climate change is one of, if not literally the biggest issues and threats that we face right now. So everything that we can do, everything in our power to address that should be a top priority. I think that we need to incentivize businesses and homeowners to utilize green alternatives, eco-sustainable and friendly options, clean energy, using things like tax incentives, tax breaks. I think that we need to focus on everything from the major citywide plans down to smaller things like cycling out city vehicles with hybrids, for example, using electric vehicles, cutting down on emissions, making sure we have more public transportation available to cut down on emissions with cars on the road. I think that utilizing our...
Cindy is absolutely right that the city needs to lead by example. And in some ways, the city already does a decent job at this. The new City Hall building is LEED certified, which is a good step. But looking at city vehicles, absolutely. I think tax breaks are a great option. I'm intrigued by Robert's waste to energy idea. I think that should be at the table. I think it's going to take a lot of different solutions, and I definitely want the city to play a part in that.
If you take a look at my website, you'll find the 3 issues on my platform. One of them is creating a climate sustainability plan. I have a background in science and I have a bachelor's degree in oceanography, so I have had a lot of experience in understanding what the climate issues are and how to be able to deal with them. Climate sustainability plan has to include both solutions to the problems that we're experiencing right now, because climate change is happening right now, it's not in the future. And also ways to be able to lower down, for example, emissions from our cars by including more recharge stations for hybrids and electric cars, and also for finding ways to be able to reduce the emissions from our friendly neighbor, the airport, where the largest emissions in this region are coming from. That is a hard job to do, but it's something that we have to do. The urban planning that's going on will include lots of pedestrian and bicycle pathways, and that's something I want to ensure.
I'm in favor of improving all access to more green space in the city of Burien. We have a lot of it, but we need more, especially around urban spaces, but in growing our park accessibility and surface water, techno-managerial aspects of the city. The number one environmental aspect of city management, I think, is surface water management, and we don't talk enough about that. Where's water coming from and where is it going? That's all in the city. I agree that I think that we need to work with the airport to reduce airline emissions. That is the number one air pollutant in our area. We need to work hard to do that. I'm not necessarily in favor of giving incentives to people who don't need them to change their habits. I think it's required. It's a requirement, especially now for people who live in not only our community but on the planet, to change their daily routines to ensure that they're reducing their own waste and their own emissions. So it's up to people to make that choice. We need to incentivize them to make that choice through cultural habits, not necessarily by giving them tax benefits.
This is literally my whole platform. Waste to energy. The literal future for you guys. We will clean up the environment. Our location is already set. It's down at 143rd and Des Moines Memorial Drive. We will go get grants from the state of Washington, from Olympia. Got to dress up nice and go do that. Bring money back here. We will get this done. BP is partnering up with Fulcrum Energy right now to turn waste to energy. If you've seen their commercials, I have a flyer outside that has their website on it. Now, we will sell jet fuel to the airport. I know this because I've talked to them. They are totally open to this idea, specifically this idea, lower their emissions. They are totally willing to play ball with us. If you noticed a big the spill that happened, the waste spill that happened in the Sound the other day, that won't happen under my watch. We will get that, siphon it out, and put it in these machines. It is going to happen. This is literally my plan. Love to talk to you more about it when we're done.
I think that we could do a lot to make a more green economy here in Burien. I'm glad that they mentioned the plan that another city has, because that could be a start. It could give us some ideas so we don't have to reinvent the wheel and choose what might fit for Burien. Also, as a city government, we could lead by example, energy efficient cars. Also, when we have new buildings, to make sure they're LEED certified. And also something that the council is working on right now is we need to embed this in creating more housing here in Burien. Is how can we incentivize those buildings and structures to be more environmentally friendly. So, and what we could also do as a city is look at how can we attract businesses that actually are in the green economy and create jobs for people who live here.
Thank you to all the candidates who shared their stances on those pre-written questions. We'll now have a brief intermission until 6:30. Please write some questions down and put them in the box. Yeah, back over there in the yellow box.
And also, please feel free to grab some food, talk to the candidates. So we'll be getting back to the questions at 6:30. So please feel free to the box right over there. It's yellow. Ask some questions. We'll be going through it. So yeah, thank you. And please grab food.
Okay. What do you think about the Burien Voice Facebook page?
Queremos saber las opiniones de los candidatos de qué opinan de la página en Facebook que se llama The Burien Voice en Facebook.
All right, well, they've blocked me. So that right there says, I think, enough. You know, I'll leave it at that. They've blocked me. That's what I think.
I try not to go there because there's this thing when you're a candidate, you try not to look at negative things, especially about yourself. So yeah, I don't even go to that page.
Yeah, there's a lot of negativity there and prejudicial stuff and antagonism towards certain people in Burien that I don't approve of. And I'm sure they're watching and listening right now, and I would like to say to the Burien Voice, can you stop being so negative to people and start being positive and showing the good in our community? And stop, why? I don't understand. If you want to make Burien a better place, it starts with you.
1000% agree with everything everybody said. But again, with my idea of WTE, every councilman will have a lane to run in. We literally will have, and we'll work together with a common idea, a common goal. Now, our friends on the right, we'll just kind of call it what it is. Our friends on the right are just that. If you're looking for a candidate who is going to actually give someone, another council member, an assignment, a thing to do that helps progress our city with this WTE idea, I'm the guy to get that done. We have candidates who have the love of the farm that's up on 128th and 4th. We could do a kitchen to table to food thing. We have a candidate who's really interested in working with the employment aspect of my idea, with the union aspect. We can get this done, and I know, it's kind of fun to bash the other side, but we kind of need folks to work with us as well. Thanks.
Well, my comment is, I like Facebook as much as everyone else, but civic engagement can't be happening only on social media. And that people really do need to practice. If you want to say something to someone, you go right up to them and ask that question. And you deal with that response, and also see, how that kind of dialogue feels. Because in this arena in city council, what we need to do is, as some of our colleagues here have said today, we are listeners, and as people who have an opinion about what our public policy would be, you need to set it up so that we have a productive dialogue. Okay, so that's just things to think about. And social media, although it's more widely available, is not the most effective way to communicate things.
Well, I think I'm in a unique position to comment on this because my opponent, Joel Manning, is actually one of the people who run the Burien Voice page. And I've got a lot to say about them in particular, but I'll try to keep it brief and civil. I think that it is despicable that people try to incite hate in our community to be divisive. There are so many things that they put out there that I just I don't understand how they feel that it's in any way appropriate. They've been mocking our mayor for being a victim of a hate crime. They mocked me publicly for volunteering with the Burien Severe Cold Weather Shelter during the big February storm. They've mocked several other people in our community for doing good work. They spread misinformation and lies, and it's just had a devastating impact on our community. There are a lot of people who read their page, who follow their page that I've engaged with and had long conversations with. I am always here to listen, but I think it's gross. I'm sorry.
All right, moving on to the next community question. What is the biggest issue in Burien right now?
La próxima pregunta que se va a hacer a los preguntantes es ¿cuáles ellos piensan es el problema más grande en el pueblo de Burien?
In my opinion, the biggest issue in Burien right now is our homelessness population and the fact that it keeps on growing and we don't seem to be able to do something about this. I have a lot of solutions that I would like to implement should I be elected. One of the biggest ones being actually putting together a men's only shelter. We have a women's only shelter, we have a family shelter, but we do not have a men's only shelter. And this is both humane and compassionate from the perspective of providing these men with a place to stay at night and a place to get help for moving forward in their lives, especially creating long-term plans to be able to get off the streets. It's also a safety factor for the rest of our population by not having people who are sleeping in our parks, who are sleeping in the in front of our small businesses, etc. We have a much safer city and a perceived safer city as well. So yes, I think that our homelessness population increase is a problem, and we really need to work on this from a humane and compassionate perspective.
I think the biggest issue in Burien right now is that we have a cultural divide around what we want our city to be. And by we, I mean people who live in Burien. And by people in Burien, I mean different neighborhoods that need to come together to talk about what we want to be prioritizing. And does that priority need to be incentivizing business creation to grow middle class family wage jobs? Or does that mean wanting to keep Burien sort of what it's been over the past 25 years, which is a bedroom community for people to live in and raise families in and then work in Seattle? So we need to come to grips with where we're at as a city and that divide around if we want to be incentivizing more local job growth here, or if we want to stay a city that just lives here and brings workers to Seattle.
W2E, waste to energy. Our biggest issue is homelessness. I've talked to many folks who said they don't want to take their kids to Burger King. They don't want to take their kids to the park just because we have a homelessness issue. I pledge with my idea to house two housing units, one for men, one for women. I pledge to have at least 50% of the staff be working at this facility. They were going to be those who deemed homeless. Once we get this up and running, those who choose to stay on the streets, our police officers will go to them and say, hey, whatever your name is, Steve, here's a voucher for you to get on the bus, go to the shelter, you're gonna have a free meal that night, you're gonna have a bed that night, and you're gonna take a shower. And if you want a job the next day, guess what? You're gonna have a job at the plant, because that's what we're all about. This is about helping people. That's literally what my idea is about, helping people. And so it's a 2-year program, your job is for life, but your housing's for 2 years. Once you cycle out of there, you're gonna get a place to live in Burien. Thank you very much.
The two key issues I hear when I'm outdoor billing is homelessness, and it's a very complex issue, and it's a mix of the solutions lie in federal law, state law, city and county, and I think it would be very strategic for the council to look at how can we partner with neighboring cities to address this issue, because if you do talk with our neighbors, SeaTac, Kent, Auburn, we all have the same concerns, yet not one city is going to solve it. So that's something I look forward to. Secondly is fair housing laws, and I believe I mentioned that the council is looking at making our housing laws more fair so that people who are at risk of homelessness don't needlessly fall into that. And third, there may be some people who need health and human services, and that we need to make sure they have access to that. The second thing is public safety, many facets. It's not just police. People talk about speed bumps, sidewalks, lighting, people speeding in their neighborhood, and really it's an effect of the growth, the incredible growth we're seeing in Burien. So those are the top 2 things I see.
I believe the biggest issue we face in Burien is poverty. Burien has a poverty rate that is well above the state average, and poverty impacts every aspect of our daily lives, from our overall health and well-being to how long kids can stay in school to crime rates. So addressing that is key to our safety, our health, our well-being, and the quality of life for all of our residents. A few things I'd like to do to start addressing that is raise our minimum wage, because we have people who work full-time, who have multiple jobs, who are still struggling to feed their families and keep their roofs over their head. Bringing more affordable housing so people don't have to choose between food and rent and basic necessities, and establishing support for our most vulnerable citizens and residents, especially low barrier shelter. As other folks have mentioned, we have no place for homeless men, which make up the largest percentage of our homeless population. So we need to have a place where we can get our folks off the street, get them stable, get them back on track.
So I volunteer every week at Transform Burien. I also volunteered at the cold weather shelter last winter, and I agree with everybody. Homelessness is the #1 issue. I think not just in Burien, but in our region. And I would say that I don't think what the city is doing right now is working. I told the council about a month ago, I was at the transit center one morning, I saw someone sleeping on a bench. The Burien officer came up to them, had them pack up, move on. About an hour later, I saw them at another bus stop a couple blocks away. That's not an effective interaction. And then in the future, if we want to offer that person services, you know, they already have this negative interaction with Burien police. That's not effective. We need to work, and I believe a lot of the private sector needs to do, like that's why I volunteer every week, because I believe the city by itself isn't going to solve anything, but the city can facilitate, and the Human Services Commission especially, can facilitate getting everybody together and on the same page, and also addressing housing.
So some of you have already touched on this, but how would you increase homeless services in Burien?
La próxima pregunta va a ser cómo ellos pueden ayudar a dar más servicios a la comunidad por las personas que no tienen un techo donde dormir en la noche y los servicios que pueden ofrecer.
So Burien has a robust, vibrant, nonprofit, non-governmental service sector that helps homeless people. We have Mary's Place, we have Transform Burien, we have organizations that work with mental health, like Navos, and then of course we are a hub for medical attention with the Highland Medical Center. I'm a big advocate of ensuring that that robust network has all the support they need to continue being the frontline assistance to homeless people, people dealing with mental health and addiction services. So the city of Burien itself does not have the funding nor personnel to support or start new activities for that. So I'm in support of ensuring that the nonprofit, non-governmental, and private sector have the tools they need to address those issues head on.
This is also something that's very, very important in my plan as well. Getting someone treatment doesn't just mean that they got an addiction or something. There's a reason you're homeless. You didn't just have a six-figure K job and all of a sudden wake up and I'm gonna be homeless today. That's not how it works. So getting someone treatment is important. My idea says you gotta follow a plan like this. Monday you work, Tuesday you get treatment for whatever your ail is. Wednesday's your day off, and that's your life every other day for the next 2 years, or until you can work 5 days a week. Once you work 5 days a week, that's when you transition out. Again, your job is still permanent, but then you have a place to live in the city. We will work with builders to then make that happen. But you can't just give somebody a job. Where are they gonna live? You can't give somebody a house. What are they gonna do for a living? So it takes 3 different legs, like I've always said. It's public, private, and nonprofit. We have this done. Our private sector's already done it. They've done it down on 143rd and Des Moines Memorial Way. Thank you very much.
I think that it's really key for the council to invest in solving the homelessness issue for our city. Among health professionals, we're starting to realize more and more there's these conditions in which people live that will either determine how long they live and their quality of life, and more that's housing. Other factors you might be familiar with is education. So unless we go for that goal that everybody deserves and needs stable housing, then we're only creating worse issues in terms of health for our community. And we have to also realize that some people may need supportive housing in the long term so that they remain productive even if they land in a place that's stable. So I just want to say that I hope you as residents of Burien understand that you're asking us to make priorities, and with limited resources that we have to make these decisions to shift what we're focusing on in our funds on something like homelessness, which our community has said we need the most.
So I want to echo that we do have incredible partnerships with nonprofit entities across the city that provide amazing services to our community, including Navos, where we are now. I think that we need to expand and build on those partnerships. As other folks have mentioned, it does come down to what kind of money we have available to do that. I would love for the city to hire a grant writer who could not only pay for their own position, but also expand the funding that we have available to partner with other organizations and provide services for our city. I think we need to focus on ensuring that we have shelter options available, housing, even look into options like tiny housing villages. Getting our people off the street should be one of our #1 priorities. So I think also expanding our navigation team availability. They do incredible outreach work with our homeless population. But yeah, I think #1 thing, let's get more funding so we can address the things that are going undealt with.
There was a study done on this actually, and it's in a previous council packet, and one of the most cost-effective recommendations was to provide bus tickets so people can go out of Burien and access services. And now it's important to note here that I'm not saying we just give them bus tickets, they just leave. No, these are Burien residents, we give them bus tickets so they can go to Seattle or to wherever the services are, get those, and then come back here, because this is their community. Because we have a great mix of services in Burien, we can always use more, but it's like, we're not going to be able to provide every single service that everyone's going to need in Burien. So I think having that access to transit is really important.
I agree with Kevin and his statement about the fact that we have plenty of resources right here in Burien. I'm going to include in that the community court, which some may not know about, and is not just at this particular time for those who have committed a misdemeanor, nonviolent crime, and are able to go to community court and access resources rather than going to jail. Anybody can actually attend community court, which is every Monday. But I'd like to also mention that, and this has been mentioned previously, that homelessness is a regional issue. South King County should be coming together. SeaTac, Tukwila, Des Moines, Normandy Park, Burien, Kent, etc. We should all be coming together and creating a regional authority that helps with providing resources. There may be resources in Kent that one of our Burien residents need. There may be resources. There may be a person who is in Des Moines that needs a resource over in Tukwila. And so we should be actually talking with all of these different cities and talking about how we can share resources.
Time.
Okay, so the final question that we have is, besides adding more police, how would you address the current crime with youth on youth violence in Burien?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear the last sentence.
Besides adding more police, how would you address the current crime with youth on youth violence in Burien?
Very good. It starts with outreach, or actually reaching in. And we'd go to the schools, kind of see what's going on. Why are we having this violent problem? Part of my idea, again, goes to having something to do during the summer. I want internships at the green plant. We brought it up. What's our kind of a green environment going to be like? I will have internship programs so that when you are 18 years old after school, you will have a job after you're out of high school. That's plain and simple. Excuse me. Give someone a focus during the summer. There's less options to have gang violence and youth violence. But we need to get into the schools, from the smallest to the tallest, and kind of see what's going on in their world today. I mean, we were young once. I'd like to have had somebody do that to me. So that's kind of number one. We get into school to see what's going on. But then you got to provide someone something to do every summer. And then at the end of that, you have a job at the end of that rainbow.
Youth on youth violence, I think that number one, we should be partnering with the schools and see what we can do together. And also, I'm very interested in knowing what are the services in the city of Burien that may not be as well known and link residents to them so that they are a resource to their families for this issue. And also, this is another reason why we should be gathering youth to hear, what are their thoughts about where is it happening? Why do they feel like it's happening so that we can develop the right approach?
I think, again, it goes back to addressing underlying causes for why youth on youth violence is occurring. Again, poverty plays a big role in crime. It can make a difference on whether or not a kid can stay in school or not, or has to go get a job to help support their family. Having strong family support also makes a big difference, and if your family is out working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep a roof over your head, you're lacking that strong support, which can also impact whether or not you stay in school or how well you do. So I think these all play into that. Also, I think that we do need to definitely focus on heavy outreach and education and prevention in our schools, as well as making sure we have robust youth programs and services available to keep kids active, engaged, involved in our community, and give them hope that they do have a bright future ahead of them and that they don't have to rely on violence or gang involvement to stay afloat and I guess stay alive. So let's tackle the problem at the root.
We absolutely need more programs for youth, and I would work to partner with the private sector on that, but even if we can't, even if the city has to do it, it's cost effective. It's so much cheaper to spend money on a youth program than to spend money on all these police interactions and cycling people through court. So whatever the city can do, in this case, I would actually say that we need to do it. And the youth council is great. I know that's not going to work for everybody, but just having that and seeing just the fact that this forum is here tonight, that's a positive benefit to our community. And hopefully some of these youth will be future candidates for city council.
Youth on youth violence is not a Burien issue, it is a national issue. This is an American crisis, and it is not just about having access to guns. Youth on youth violence is about having our youth exposed to so much negativity, especially online. If you've been on the internet as a 16-year-old, as a 12-year-old, as an 18-year-old, and you end up in a situation where you are constantly bombarded by all the negative statements that are being made. Many of you who are older may not really understand just what it's like to spend a large portion of your life on the internet and listen to people talking to you about how horrible you are because you're a woman, how terrible a person you are because you might be black, how you're not really a good individual. You really should just go out and shoot yourself. And if you think that that is the worst, it's not.
Youth development is interdisciplinary, and we have to address the development of youth through a myriad of factors. I come at it from wanting to empower families and young people to assist themselves in gaining internships, apprenticeships, job opportunities, because the single greatest thing a society and a community can do to young adults and emerging adults is provide them an outlook for the future, to say, this is where you can go, this is what you can be. Right now we leave so many young people behind because we don't show them the pipeline they can take to full-time employment, to a good life, to getting married, to having kids, whatever they want to do. We do not provide the avenues to see into the future for them. So that's why they're going online, that's why they're lonely there. We're talking about them like they don't exist. They're over there. Go ask them yourselves. They'll tell you that they want to know what is available to them in the future. They want to know that they can have a good job, that they can live a healthy, productive life. And I think we need to ensure that the city works to provide that vision.
So that concludes the forum. Yeah, so we have, what's that?
Aren't there questions that we can
We are out of time, unfortunately. But we do want to thank you all for being here tonight. It's incredibly important that we also have the support of the community. We planned super hard for this. We worked incredibly hard to see it all come together. It has been extremely rewarding. Thank you to the candidates that were able to be here today. We really appreciate you answering our questions and being out here today. This is what it's about. It's about community, and that's what we're doing here today. Also, Davianne is going to give a statement.
Just a quick statement to recant. I know I somewhat covered it in the disclaimer in the beginning of this, but if anyone has forgotten, Burien Youth Council is separate from the city. We are our own independent entity. This forum here was completely organized by youth, the youth that are in this room right now. And that's not to say that we don't welcome the help of city organizations and public organizations. We need all the help that we can get, but we're saying that youth need to have a platform and youth voices need to be heard, and the Youth Council that is represented here today, this is the first step to being heard. So thank you for coming and listening to our voices and our opinions. As well as